Ladies and gentlemen, the world we live in today has only three absolute truths. Number one, death. Number two, taxes, unless you're really rich. And number three, the fact that chess is a really difficult game, and all of us are on this eternal quest of going up the rating ladder. Now, I just have to tell you something. You should cherish the days that you are in the three digits, because the truth is there is so much to learn about the game. Every day you can learn two or three things, and today we are going to look at a game that was sent to me by people that I'm going to keep anonymous, because again, I don't like when people's inboxes get flooded, but this is a colossal matchup of two 400 rated players, and this game is absolutely fantastic. It's so fantastic, I need to take a long sip of coffee before I get into it, because it's the morning right now. Okay, hopefully my brain either gets stunted by these moves or by my coffee. Here we go. D4, obviously for these low-rated games, we are going to have the eval bar on. So we have a London. I mean, good stuff so far. E3, black violates the principle of developing the knight in front of a c-pawn during a queen's pawn position. Not the best setup here, but I mean, for white to take advantage of this, white really has to know what they're doing. White develops the bishop. I don't hate it. And already, as of move 5, we get a borderline novelty by black. Black does not choose to develop the bishop or develop the other one. Black lashes out with g5. And actually, this is why viewer games are so much fun, because I guarantee some London players watching, or any of you, will get unorthodox stuff in the opening that kind of breaks your setup. That you don't really know what to do. That's not standard. Well, what white should do here is white should retreat back to g3 and kind of punish this, because now, once black has overextended early in the opening, they're not really going to be castling as easily, and you can always utilize pawn breaks once the king commits there, or the king won't commit there at all. But this is not like completely losing, it's just suboptimal, but it's important to learn from. Okay, in the game, bishop e5 happens. Now, that actually doesn't look that bad of a move, because you pin this. It is a bad move, because after capture, there is this move. And knight to g4 immediately seeks to round up this pawn. Actually, that pawn is very difficult to defend, because if you defend it like this, you lose this one. So now knight g4 is a tough move to see. And by the way, knight d7 doesn't come with the same firepower because of this move. And sometimes, early on in the game, if the opponent doesn't develop correctly, they can weaken their king and get mated. So that's always a common idea, to open up the king by virtue of a pawn sacrifice. Now in the game, we go as early as move 7 for black to just immediately blunder a knight. Knight to h5, loose pieces, one movers. Look at your opponent's diagonal attackers. Queen takes h5. All right, not so bad. e6. Further blocking in that bishop, although it was going to be very difficult to develop now that you've lost the ability to move it. So e6. Not a terrible move. Now, white obviously here should develop the knights, get castled, and then and only then open up the position, but white is hyped. White's like, yeah, I'm up a knight, f4, let's open up this board. Not a bad move, don't really hate it, takes. Now black's like, well, I blocked in my light squared bishop, so obviously I have to develop it in the other direction. White here plays a4. Not developing the knights. Like, it's crazy, because you're the only one on the board with the knights. You might as well use them. Here white is actually going for something known as a queenside flank pawn infiltration. Obviously, the 401 rated player from Australia did know that they were going for that. A4 and A5 is on the way, trying to attack the potentially weak light squares. And so c5, black strikes back in the center. White just carries on executing that plan. And black also proceeds with the plan of attacking the bishop. Okay? White moves the bishop out of the way, and black develops. See, this is what I like. I mean, I like the fact that even though black is down material, black is finding a way to gain space with pawns, developing pieces. And finally, white is like, oh, yeah, sorry, I forgot I had knights. So white just push the pawn 2 squares, completely abandon that plan, by the way. And if anyone's wondering why that pawn is not getting taken, your guess is as good as mine. I don't know. It can just be taken. Probably black saw a video a long time ago that was like doubled pawns are bad, so black's not taking a free pawn. But black really doesn't have to, beggars can't be choosers. Take the free damn pawn. Anyway, black's like, well, I gotta make some more progress. So d4. Yo, if you're down material and you got like one piece in the center, it's not your business to create the attack. However, 400s get to break all principles. In this position, the eval is plus 3.5, and after d4, it's plus 7 to plus 8. A full bishop and a pawn more for the person with the white pieces, and yet I think it's the best move. Why? Because the computer doesn't understand the way 400s think. This is a really smart decision to play d4, because watch, what happens when the big simplification happens? I understand it's +8, but there's a queen here. Do you not understand that a queen is the most terrifying of prospects to arrive on a person's board? It will take everybody and beat all the pieces to within an inch of their life. I understand that the best move is knight to c3, but white doesn't understand that, all right? Here, white clearly saw the young Elo rap and therefore was inspired by playing rook a4. White obviously saw that and was like, oh, I gotta play rook a4. I see it. Doesn't matter that it's not the best move. Doesn't matter that it absolutely does not deal with the two weaknesses. And now queen takes b2. Now you're like, oh, damn, I saw rook a4 and I liked it, but I can't take on c4. Actually, fantastic move here by white to play king to f2. Because what white thought was that if they castle, they lose the bishop. But they forgot that the queen defends it. That's why white decided to play king f2. So I like the move king f2. I actually like it because it sort of does make sense to protect the knight and also to protect the bishop. It's a mistake, but you know what? It doesn't matter. Now, black is like, well, everything else is on the back rank. I might as well push my pawn. Also, don't hate that move. I don't care if it's +6. Don't hate that move at all. c2's coming. c1's coming. White now has to make a backwards attacking move. That is so difficult. And white just doesn't even, and white said, you know what, I'm not going to even deal with that pawn. I'm going to get rid of it. I don't care if it costs me a knight. Pawn takes b6. We in here. Let's go. Now the best move for black is to attack this weak king with check, taking this pawn. And now black's not even down any material. But we have queen b3. I also don't hate this move. Here, the fact that white even finds this move, white should just win this game by default for finding a backwards offensive, but also defensive move. I don't care if the evaluation of this position is now back to equality. White should win this game for even knowing that that move was legal. Now, the engine gives rook d4 because the engine is like, well, even though material is equal, this king is very weak and we need to focus down the middle line, and then you bring your other rook to defend. And yeah, materially speaking, actually, we've restored the balance, but again, because all of black's pieces are undeveloped, white has the advantage. But okay, now the king runs out to g3. We have a check on g8. And folks, just a general rule of thumb, if you can get away to safety, you should do it. If you can pin your own pieces, you are probably going to lose the game. Do not pin your pieces unless 100% required, because you're so focused over here, you're going to forget why the bishop was there in the first place. And now, black actually deserves to win the game for the next move that they played. Black looks around and doesn't go for the closest check possible, which, by the way, is absolutely terrifying. This is the only move, and yet the advantage is gone. They find this move. Attacking that loose rook on a4, that's beautiful. This queen has done so much damage, which is why infiltrating with the queen was so important. I don't care if the engine tells you it's wrong. It was so important to do that. Now king h4, queen a4, and now it is black who maintains a commanding advantage of the game. Queen takes a4 on the board. Queen f4 is incoming. Rook to c1. I don't hate that move at all. I mean, we are still not seeing queen f4. Queen f4 just ends the game. And just a little friendly piece of advice. After something like queen f4, let's say this rook, I don't know, goes like back. Just do this. Just do it. I mean, you're gonna simplify the position down to nothing and just push your a pawn. And now white has no counterplay. If you allow your opponent's major pieces to stay on the board when you're completely winning, there's a chance you blunder something. I'm just saying, like, you don't have to sacrifice a queen for a pawn, but a queen and a rook for a queen and a bishop, while you have an extra bishop and a passed pawn, completely fine. Anyway, bishop d7. Now white's like, well, I don't really know what to do. I don't have a whole lot, so I'm gonna just take this pawn. Don't hate this move. Keep saying that all game. Don't hate it. It protects this from the queen. The problem is that you have a queen and a king on the same line. So anytime black is going to be able to get a rook on h8, black is going to be very happy. Black can't do that right now because that would result in losing both your rooks, which I don't really necessarily not expect, but you know. Now, rook c8, beautiful. Simplifying, yes. White does not simplify. However, the advantage is now plus 13 because in this position, this actually loses the rook. It looks like it's defended, but it's not because rook takes bishop is check. So you would lose the bishop with check, then you would lose the rook, and now you are really, really in trouble. And yet, by the way, even there, like let's say this happens, now it's a draw. It's never too late to blunder. Why is it a draw? When you're down this much material, catching the king in a perpetual check. So making sure the king cannot escape, you have check, here, check, and the king only has 2 moves, and then only 1 move to get out of that check. So it's never too late to blunder even if you're 7 points down in material. So, rook d1, black's like, I gotta activate my rook down to c2. Yes, makes a lot of sense. Now white plays the best move of the entire game. Well, not really, but I mean, it's like plus like 20 now for black. f5. Now, f5 hangs mate in 1. f5 hangs mate in 1. So, you might be like, why did they play the best move of the game? Well, because it's really hard to see that crisscross from the other side of the board. White has a broken leg and is still kicking their opponent. I mean, it's like some crazy movie stuff, you know? f5 is the last piece of material that you can throw forward. Now, if this pawn was on h3, f5 would just win like a Nobel chess prize. f5 is so good. Now, black can take on f5, by the way, but is like scared, decides, you know what, I went down here for a reason, let's play rook g2. Now, we have 3 pieces lined up on the bishop. 3. That bishop is dead. It doesn't even matter if you defend it anymore. It can just be taken, okay? White, meanwhile, is just going to throwing haymakers. fe6, absolutely devastating here. Attacking this, black's like, oh my god. I mean, if I take this, I mean, I still have like force mate. Nobody can even take me, but it looks a little scary. You know, I don't want to allow this rook to come down to my king. Okay, I'm not going to do that. F takes c6. Whoa, I really don't like that. That's a little bit too weakening. I really don't like mate in 1, mate in 2, mate in 3. I don't like any of that. I want to go get this rook now. The craziest thing is that move is actually good because everything else is so good too. The engine here gives check as the only move for white. Why? Because after king f7, there is e6! And if you take it, you lose! You lose because of check. And for example, if king to f8, then after this, wait, where is it? You give this check to protect this pawn, and then you take the queen. And then you take the queen. And the craziest thing, there's no ladder mate. The queen protects the only 2 squares on which you can give a ladder, which is just completely insane. I mean, that's beyond anybody's pay grade, but that's not the point. That's not the point. Queen takes d1, bishop d1, it's still mate. But at this point, black's like, yo, I hung a queen. Oh my god, I'm so dumb. The bishop that I could have taken with 3 different pieces, I managed to hang my queen to, and yet not really, because it's still mate. Rook takes pawn is mate, but black plays rook to g4 and now loses the rook as well to the same bishop. And now you would think, by the way, now black actually does see this move. Now black's like, oh, I had rook h2. Now white, whose bishop has beaten a queen and a rook, just needs one more move and we're done. We're clear. We're all clear and we're safe. And yet, if you play bishop to h3, there is this. And yet, there is this, and you cannot escape. So the 400 rated player, obviously by 100% sheer miracle, and not the fact that they remembered here that bishops could go backwards, was like, oh damn, I'm losing my queen, I gotta go out to g5 to protect my queen, because if I go out to g3, I lose it for free. So they remembered earlier bishops go backwards, but not here. And then this. And here white has to play a Zwischenzug, an in-between move, continuing the plan of the march. Take the bishop with check, and then take the rook, and now white is winning. And now white is winning. But that obviously doesn't happen. We get king takes h6, f takes e6, and now the endgame is marginally, just marginal winning chances for black because they have this a-pawn. Now what's interesting is bishop, pawn, and king versus this would be a draw because the promotion square of the a or h-pawn has to be the same color as the bishop. That pawn promotes on a dark square. If this king gets to this corner, it's a draw. Obviously, both players know this. If you want to clinch a draw right about now, you play like this, and then you can get back. But you need to be sure that you can do it. If you can't do it right here, then you can't. Watch. King g5, a5, king f4, a4. You lose the race. So what do? Give it a couple of moves. King g5, let's say king e7, king f4. Now you can do it. You need to survive this race to the pawn. Okay, that's the way you draw this. You just take. Don't even try the bishop endgame. Don't try. All right, because you're gonna end up like in this game. King to g6. Now black plays a5 because obviously it's the only pawn remaining. a5. King to f6. a4. And white is not concerned with the stopping of the a-pawn. White just has to get back. That's all white has to do. Bishop d1, a3, bishop b3. Put the bishop in front of the pawn. You never lose. What is white doing? White takes on e6. White takes on e6. What is the calculation here? The king is already in front of the pawn. The king's not moving anywhere. King's like, let's go. So black makes the queen. And ladies and gentlemen, the final plot twist. Black does not know how to checkmate with king and queen. Black continues to shuffle endlessly back and forth, desperately looking for a solution, or perhaps taunting their opponent and trying to run them out on the clock. And yet, white voluntarily ran into a mate. Folks, if you're trying to defend king versus queen, put your king in the middle where it has the most mobility. Do not run your king to the back rank. It's mate like this. It's mate like this. There's so many mates. And yet, the game ends not by stalemate, not by blunder of queen, not by timeout, but the game concludes on move 92. By the 50 move rule, which states that if no pieces are captured and no pawns are advanced in 50 turns, the game ends in a draw. Ladies and gentlemen, after 92 rounds, we go to the judges' scorecards for a decision, and the judges ruled this contest an absolute catastrophe. Peace out. I'll see you in the next video.